How about that?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
I can.
so we're I'm mostly knowing what I'm doing, but not so good because I didn't play that for YouTube at all, so they didn't get to see my cool promo.
Oh,
Did you get to hear it and see it?
I did. That was
What?
cool.
It was pretty cool. I don't know whether to restart it for YouTube for the not the whole video timer, but the minute and 40 something. I feel like they missed out. I want to debut that real quick. So let's do it. I'm sorry. I just want YouTube to see this intro, and then you and I will get right at it.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on stage. And I'm going to back this up. Maybe.
You have a horrible echo on TikTok.
I have a horrible echo on TikTok. All right.
YouTube is fine, but TikTok is echoing.
Boy, I need some technical help,
Nah.
All right, here we go. We're gonna roll this. We're gonna roll this for YouTube to be able to see.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to know why I'm here today? It's not because I want to give you a pep talk or because I want to make you feel good about yourselves. No, I'm here to tell you the truth.
All right. Now, I think we're live, you and I, right?
I think so. I can hear you and see you.
Oh, so we're mostly there. Yeah. Now the only question is, because I know that TikTok can hear you. Now the only question is whether or not they can hear me on the TikTok side, and they can't hear Lee. And if I put my mic on so they can hear me, they're going to get a big echo. Now you guys got echo? We won't spend a lot of time. And again, if you guys want to hear it and we don't get TikTok working, we're going to move over and there's an echo. Okay, I'll try one thing to fix it, and then we're going to focus on YouTube. Okay, I think I just removed the echo in TikTok. I think we're good.
Awesome.
Can hear you now, and okay, I did it. Whoo! Thank you for bearing with me. Holy shit. I don't. So I know. So first of all, I want to let everybody know this is my friend Ali Benevento. Now, friend, again, I don't know her on a personal level, but Ali's been on my show. Yeah, I think so. Ali's been on my show multiple times. She's a criminal defense attorney of over 15 years in South Carolina, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so I've had her on the show before. She follows the Luigi Mangione case, trying to get her interested in the Idaho 4 case, which is the other case, of course, that I follow. But Ali's still getting boned up, I think, on that. And but the Luigi case had something new today. And even though I know, Ali, you had trial going on, you're making some time to set aside to come do a hot take on Karen's thing.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw. I guess the prosecution has dropped an 84-page document today that we don't have time to talk about, and that's going to be enormous.
Yeah, and they have not updated it on Karen A's website either. So
right, I got it mailed. See, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about, and in fact, I'm gonna ask you about it right now. I'm going to show you something, so you can see my screen, right? I'm going to go and share something. Give me a second here. Share my screen. I'm going to go entire screen. I'm going to go here. I'm going to share, and then we're going to put it on stage. We're going to remove that. We're going to put that on stage. Do you see that letter?
I got me an analog copy.
All right. What I was curious about is on the screen right now that you can see, this is what supposedly is the new document filed by the state of New York in response to basically Karen's big, huge motion that she made.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's legit. I don't see any stamp markers everywhere verifying this as a submission, but it looks legit, and it is quite lengthy. Do you have any? Is this like a draft form, or would it be stamped?
No, I've only had people message me about it as a rumor, and of course I've been like refreshing all day to try to see if anything was posted. I have not yet, and I have not had the time to go and try to see if I could access it through the court website. So, don't know. But we've all got a lot of reading to do if it's real.
So yeah, exactly. And after our show, I'll go through and read all these 82 pages. The thing that scared me, just as a preview, and again, we're not going to spend time on this because you and I haven't had time to look at it. But the part that kind of scared me, and I have a question for you about something you haven't seen. So give me a second. Is this part right down here, Exhibit A? So here's actually supposedly photographed pages from the so-called manifesto that we're all worried about, including Exhibit B, which is here's his confession letter to the feds, right? And so this is the part that would scare the crap out of anybody who's in the camp of Luigi didn't do it. If he literally wrote a confession letter to the feds and it's in the exhibit, that's a problem for he didn't do it. Now, there may be a bigger discussion about whether he did it and well, there's other nuances to this case, right? But that's what kind of worries me the most. One of the questions that I had about it, again, before you've read it or anything like that, is somebody asked me, ask Allie if it is common for the prosecution, for example, to always respond with, nope, it was totally legit. Like, are they ever going to concede any of the points and say, okay, you're right, you got us, that was an illegal arrest? Are they ever going to do that? Or is it always going to be, nope, that was totally illegal arrest? That's always the answer.
Yeah, they're always going to make their argument for why what they did was right. And especially in this case where, you know, they've got a habit of feeling justified in what they do. And then maybe later when they get completely pinned up against a wall about it, they'll admit that they're wrong. But I don't anticipate that happening here. They're not going to concede any points as to the constitutionality of any of Karen's arguments or the arrest, I don't think.
And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about too, is because it almost seems like, you know, everybody can make if they're a good writer, you can make a really compelling argument. And when you read it, you're like, oh shit, you know, like, because when Karen wrote this was an illegal arrest, you're like, oh shit, like there's no question anybody's going to say that was legal. And then when they respond, you'll read it, I'm sure, before you even read it, and you're like, oh shit, I guess they're right. Like, because everybody's really good.
Right.
And
our
so
running joke is that, like, you always know when a opposing counsel has done a good job when their response makes you feel like you wrote your motion in crayon. Because it does happen. You're like, ooh, they've got a good point there.
Right. And so then it comes down, right, as a judge is going to review both sides of the argument and make a ruling on it, right? As to, okay. So, and does it become, how much of that becomes a creative writing exercise on who wrote better, or how much is it just like, I don't care how good you wrote your argument, I'm just going to go look at the law and apply it and tell you what the answer is?
Yeah, it's the judge's job to look at the law and to render a decision based on the arguments from both sides. It's the government's obligation to argue their points. Karen argues hers, and at the end of the day, the judge is going to decide what's right. And if he's wrong, then that's what we have appellate courts for.
So yeah, so I'm kind of scary to dig into that one. I mean, I don't even know what to expect. It's funny. It's like it's a rule of thumb for me that an hour before I go live, some major document's going to drop, and then everybody's going to be like, I can't get to it now, so that's so yesterday's news, because it's the internet, right? So when I do my deep dive on it, to be like, that's so yesterday's news. Like I saw 7 other content creators talk about it already, and you're just now getting to your breakdown. But Jesus, like, this is a full-time job to do this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. People were pinging me all day long, and I'm sitting in court and I'm like, guys, I'm going to get to it. I promise. Give me a second.
Yeah, I don't know how you find the time with that. I mean, because at least I don't have another job. You have already a job, and I'm sure you spend a lot of hours outside of the courtroom working as well. So I don't even know how you find the time for that, all that kind of stuff. So just as a real quick, before we get into this letter, I want to share that on YouTube, my channel on YouTube has over doubled. I think there's close to 2,000 new people that have signed up in the last 36 hours or so. Yeah. And most of them came here because of the Idaho 4 case. So a lot of people who are following my channel right now may have never heard me talk about Luigi Mangione. They may not know a lot about Luigi Mangione. So I'm just going to do a very quick bringing some people up to speed who are new to the channel, right? Perfect. So on December 4th, basically 2024, at an investor conference in New York, a person at about, what was it, 6:40 in the morning or something like that, I think it was, shot and killed Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, outside of an investor conference. I would say in broad daylight, but it was still kind of nighttime hours. The shooter was wearing a mask and wearing all black, had a backpack on, jogged across the street after the shooting, shot Brian Thompson 3 times in the back, and jogged across the street, got onto an e-bike, rode into Central Park. As I would stress, law enforcement lost him on cameras for quite some time in Central Park. An individual matching the same description came out the other side of Central Park at a different exit. They started following him. The person got away. There was a manhunt for 5 days, and in Altoona, Pennsylvania, 5 days later, on the 9th, I think, of December it was, a person by the name of Luigi Mangione was arrested. They said that he was the shooter from New York, that they recognized him immediately as the shooter. There was some early pictures of Luigi Mangione supposedly at a hostel nearby, who had checked in and pulled his mask down, at some point flirted with some female supposedly and put his mask down to flirt with her, and they got a good picture of his face. And allegedly, they can identify that as Luigi Mangione. He was arrested. The arrest in Altoona, Pennsylvania, he had an attorney, Thomas Dickey, who argued that arrest was illegal. Luigi Mangione presented an identification that said he was Mark Rosario. They basically used that as part of, hey, you provided false identification to a law officer as part of the arrest. But Thomas Dickey argued, one, he was never read his Miranda rights for 17 minutes. They basically illegally interrogated him, didn't tell him it was under investigation, didn't read him his Miranda rights, illegally searched and seized his property. When they realized he had incriminating evidence in his backpack, they immediately stopped the search, repacked his backpack, took it to the police station, and then inventoried it. And all of a sudden, new things were showing up as an inventory. So now people think they planted evidence. He was shortly extradited to New York because he's wanted on murder in New York. He is currently has 3 jurisdictions that are going after Luigi Mangione. We've got the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that made the arrest, and they basically have him on false identification and gun charges in Pennsylvania. And then you've got the state of New York and the U.S. government in New York, the Southern District of New York, who are trying Luigi Mangione, both for the same crime, essentially, which is the murder of Brian Thompson. And so he's facing 3 different trials. And then, so you're mostly up to speed now. So Karen Agnifilo is his main attorney, or Agnifilo, depending on how you want to pronounce it. The whole name pronunciation, I get kicked in the nuts all the time for this, no matter how I pronounce it. Anyways, Karen Agnifilo basically had submitted a big motion, basically asking to suppress evidence, in part because the Altoona arrest she said was illegal. She wanted to drop the double prosecution of Luigi, both in the state and the federal government in New York, and say, let's just have one trial. It's not fair to my client to have to fight 2 different trials at once, especially since both trials are having a slightly different theory, and to basically defend himself in one case, he may prejudice himself in the other case. So there's all those fights. That prosecution, the prosecution responded to that motion, and that's the one we're talking about. We don't have time to look at that. Just happened today, as Ali and I are getting ready to talk about a much lesser issue, which is this letter by Karen Agnifilo, where she's writing to the state. This is the Supreme Court of the state of New York, which you can see on screen right now, and it's Gregory Caro is the judge, where she's basically asking, this letter, the gist of the letter is, let's agree and put an order in place that says Luigi Mangione, our client, is not going to have to come to court shackled with a bulletproof vest on and basically look like he's such a huge danger to the public. So I want to get your initial thoughts on this. I know you said, Ali, that you did a video on this and you want to do a deeper dive on it. So before I even tell you what I'm feeling about it, why don't you tell us some of your feelings on this letter?
Sure. Well, to be fair, I just got the video up shortly before we started here. I think a couple things. Yes, her 2 main requests are, we don't want him shackled. We don't want him wearing the Kevlar vest. But I think it's so much bigger than that. Karen is doing what Karen does so well, which is to take the issue, but also and address it, but also take the opportunity to address the larger issues or the philosophic issues at play. And she's doing that so well here, because what she's doing is she is weaving into the narrative this idea that she has been harping on from day one, which is that the government and what it's doing and the way that it is responding to Luigi, handling Luigi, placing things out into the ether about Luigi is slowly, not really that slowly, eroding his likelihood of being able to get a fair trial and to be able to select a jury that's going to give him a fair trial. And she is taking the opportunity to make these 2 small, very reasonable requests, but she's doing it in a way where she's also putting them on notice that she's saying, I know exactly what you're doing, and I'm not going to let you get away with it without calling you out for it. And I loved that about the way she did it.
Yeah, I want to ask. This is I hate being put on the spot like I'm going to do with you. There's a sentence or two. There's a sentence or two that Karen had in this letter that I loved. It was my favorite part of the letter. Could you guess what sentence or two she said in this that I just laughed and thought was amazing?
I hope it's my favorite. On page 5, when it says, to counsel's knowledge, there have been no threats to Mr. Mangione's safety, and the only one wishing to execute him is the federal government.
That's the one. That's amazing. When I saw it, I was laughing my ass off. Like, the only person who wants to kill Luigi Mangione is the federal government. And I was like, that's
Do you want
awesome.
to see what's funny? So I'm so old school. Do you see what I wrote right next to that paragraph? Can you see my
shade?
Chicken scratch? Shade.
Yeah.
I love it. Nobody throws shade like Karen A.
It was awesome. I literally laughed out loud. I did a long form video on this today, and I couldn't say that line without laughing again out loud. I'm like, that's the best line ever. I love it. So anyways, yeah, so that's great. I wanted to talk about that. Somebody, I pinned a comment here from YouTube. I heard that they call it a manifesto does not have the components to qualify as a manifesto.
Right.
Right. And that is one of the things.
Because he didn't release it.
Yeah, you go ahead. You because I talk all the time. You tell us a little bit your thoughts.
No. I'm sorry. I think we have a little bit of a delay, so I apologize. I was talking over you, but yeah, I concur. I mean, he didn't release it to the public. This was essentially a private journal. So for them to be referring to it as a manifesto, again, this is to the point of what they're trying to do. They're trying to characterize him as a crazy person. And a manifesto, in our minds, we immediately go to an unhinged, murderous, crazy person. But a journal is something that a lovely boy in therapy does, right?
Right. And the real question becomes, and again, I don't want to get ahead of us too much, but the real question becomes, do I have it on the screen still?
No, it's gone.
No, I'm putting it on the screen now. Give me a second. And I'm just going to take a peek, because one of the things that was said was, hey, this thing where he talks about these grievances was written from like 2017. Now here's an 8/15 date. Again, I'm not going to read all this, but there's an 8/15 date on this thing. There's a 10/22 date. So one can argue, if I haven't read what they're highlighting here, but if these pages that they're showing are his grievances against the health industry, it looks like it's from, is that, well, okay, yeah. So is that 8/15 as in 2015, or is it 8? Yeah, it would have, no, could be 8/15 as in the 15th. So anyways, the real question is going to become, was this an old journal with grievances, perhaps when he was talking about things when he had a spondy injury, or is it new stuff? But really, the heart of the issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ali, is that the reason why we're arguing about the term manifesto is a manifesto is designed to be sent to the public to explain why you're doing what you're doing, and it's meant to be a public expose a bit, and out there for everybody to see. This is why I did it. And right. What the defense's argument is Luigi Mangione had a private journal, and the only people who made this public was law enforcement. That's so right. You can't argue that he was planning on making this public and therefore it's a manifesto when you're the one that told everybody about it. Nobody even knew about it until you made it public.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, so just, I think it's an important point that this is why some of us argue about, and we kind of cringe. We're like, oh, frickin' manifesto, here we go. Manifesto was a prejudicial way of trying to make him look bad, because when you hear the word manifesto, you think a crazy person, you think, a Unabomber, you think whatever, because they all have manifestos and they all go out and shoot people and do things because they have a manifesto. And it's a way to basically prejudice the population.
Yep.
All right, let's take a look at the letter a little bit. There's two ways we can do that. You can either kind of, because I want to let you go as soon as you can, or as soon as you need to. But do you want to just hit what your favorite parts of the letter or points that you want to talk about and take the lead? Or do you want me to prompt you on kind of looking through here and going, oh, this was something I wanted to talk about, and this, how do you want to do this?
Sure. Yeah, you go ahead. I'll follow your lead.
All right. So again, we're talking about how they basically want to request that before. So we have an upcoming date in the state case of June 26th. And basically, I think Karen's trying to settle out before we have this. Let's get something understood. Yep. Let's not have Luigi Mangione come in shackles and a bulletproof vest. And so she's basically talking about how they've already prejudiced a lot of people with this mayor-led perp walk, which was the most, did she actually, I think she labeled, somewhere in here, I think she talked about how there was literally like an airplane, a helicopter, a 15-car parade, and the mayor shows up on the perp walk, right?
Yep.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And another point that she made in a previous document, if you remember, I think you and I talked about this. She made a comment that something like 340 people were murdered in New York last year alone. Why is this the only one that the mayor shows up for? And you have all of this, unprecedented thing. Why is all those other murders not important? Why is the CEO make all of a sudden it's all hands on deck for that thing?
Yep. Yeah, she does a really good job to kind of point out that this is a real coordinated effort on the part of law enforcement among multiple agencies to put these prejudicial images of Luigi and the crime out there into the public. And she takes every opportunity at every point to reinforce that.
Right. And there was, she talks about how he's a model prisoner, a model defendant in court. He never fought back against law enforcement. In fact, in my deep dive this morning, I showed a little bit of that video where the famous video where Luigi Mangione is growling at the camera and they famously take that one still frame where he looks like he's pissed off and yelling, right? And then he plastered all over everything. And literally when you watch the video, they had literally just slammed him against a wall, trying to shove him into the courthouse so he couldn't talk to the media. So there was a little bit of resistance, but he certainly wasn't fighting police. He was handcuffed and shoved against a wall where they went in. And that's the picture everybody gets to see.
Yeah. Right? And the reason they shoved him is because he made a very good point when he was yelling out, calling them out for saying that your coverage of all of this is an insult to the public. And so that part gets left out a lot as well.
I'm curious what your thoughts are, by the way, about that. So you're right. His statement was, your coverage of this is an insult to the, the American public and their lived experience, something to that extent, right? So at that point, I'm wondering, what did Luigi know about the coverage of that? Was he just talking about the fact that the perp walk? I mean, actually at that point, that was still in Altoona, I think. So I'm not even sure what exactly he was railing against exactly, but I thought that was an interesting comment. And at first I was worried, like, well, does that mean he's showing guilt? Like, but it was just, I don't know. What are your thoughts on what he was?
Yeah, no, I mean, he pretty much said, you guys are all out of touch and you're missing the issue and you're ignoring what people live every day. I mean, I think he was more speaking to a philosophical point, but I don't have any worries that was an indication or an admission of guilt of any kind. I think he felt frustrated, probably exactly for the reason you just said, because of the perp walk, because of the great lengths that they went to kind of make this look like, hell, I live in South Carolina. Dylan Roof didn't get treated that way when they took him into custody. So, I think what he was probably feeling frustrated about is just all of the hoopla surrounding everything. But, it kind of makes you wonder, had he been following? I don't know.
And the $1 million question is, and maybe we can't get into the mind of Luigi Mangione if you don't feel comfortable with it, but it was the question, is he railing against, I'm innocent and you're acting like I'm guilty and that's what is the problem? Or was it the bigger philosophical question of the healthcare system, and this is this is me as not the problem, it's the healthcare system. So was it a statement against, I'm an innocent guy being treated this way, or is it, you're not talking about the big issue here?
Yeah, like you said, I don't think we can get into his head, but in my head, he's a smart kid, and I think it was a statement. It was the latter, that he was saying, you're missing the big picture here. You think that this is a murder in New York City. This is so much bigger than that. And I think he could have done it or did it in a way that he disassociated from it. He wasn't making any admissions. I don't think he was outraged in that moment that he was being falsely accused or accused of the crime. I think it was rather that he was almost kind of laughing, like, hey, media, you're missing the entire point and you're so out of touch. You care about this perp walk and you care about this one murder. Let me tell you what I think the American people actually care about. And I think he was probably frustrated with that in the context of, like you said, of the healthcare industry. But again, that's just me speculating. I don't know what
well, it's not just you, because it's exactly what I feel too. And it's the big question: can and should Karen Agnifilo be able to somehow work this into putting the healthcare industry on trial? Because again, in my mind, and this is where I've asked you before, but I want you to clarify for me and for the audience. If Karen were to say, oh, and I'm not sure she is going to, okay, my guy did it, but here's why he did it. Does that open up the floodgates then to be able to show a jury why it was done, and therefore put the healthcare? Because if it's all about Brian Thompson, I imagine a judge is going to say the healthcare system's not on trial here,
right?
So it's a shutdown. But if you say the motive for this is the healthcare system, therefore we have to talk about what Luigi was motivated by. Can that be done? Do you think that's even possible? Or are they going to go for a he wasn't there, he didn't do it defense?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I mean, a lot of that is going to depend on private conversations between Luigi and Karen. There's always that, we say it's a whodunit, either it wasn't you or it was you, and let me tell you why it happened kind of thing. The tricky part about the whole, it was me, but let me tell you why it happened, is that you are going to get that pushback. I don't know that the judge is going to allow that type of defense. I'm going to raise the comparison to the Menendez brothers' imperfect self-defense claim from their trial as well. They were basically, for people who aren't familiar, the Menendez brothers decades ago murdered their parents and said that they did it because they feared for their lives because they were being sexually abused, and it was considered an imperfect self-defense claim. So if Luigi is saying, I did this on behalf of the American people as a statement in response to capitalism and healthcare, I mean, you are almost inviting jury nullification. Like, you can't have jury nullification be your defense strategy. And so I think a judge would give a lot of pushback on that. But without knowing specifics of the evidence and what Luigi's conversations have been with Karen, I don't know what route they're going to take. Right now, they haven't really made any statements. They haven't come out and said, you've got the wrong person and we know it. Luigi's been framed and here's why. We just don't know at this point.
And I agree. And I guess I'm just trying to play devil's advocates to think this through, which is that if they go for the my guy's not guilty, he wasn't there, you have to prove it defense, then they can't talk about why it was done, right? Because it could be right. They'd be like, I don't know why it's done. My guy didn't do it. Right. So if Luigi is this guy who wants to have the bigger conversation, and these are all a bunch of ifs. We don't know because we're not in the head of Luigi Mangione, right? But if he's wanting to have the bigger conversation, then making it I wasn't there, I didn't do it would defeat his whole message, right? If he's trying to get people to look at the bigger picture. I don't know.
Or maybe here's my, put my aluminum foil hat on here for a second. Maybe he was just the perfect person to take the fall for it because of his views on the healthcare industry. And because he was vocal about it, or he had written about it, or expressed those views to people. Maybe he was the perfect person. I don't know.
Now, when you say fall guy, do you mean like set up by somebody and he didn't do it and somebody set him up, or a group of people?
We're venturing into silly conspiracy theory territory. I know. I was just kind of raising the point for argument's sake.
And I suppose as an attorney, you want to be really careful about going down that road.
Yeah.
But fair enough. Well, let's leave it at that. There's a lot of thoughts that I have in mind, and this is one of the things I get in trouble for because I view that as critical thinking, right? Looking at all the different possibilities. Some people don't appreciate that kind of logic, but I don't mind doing that. So again, let's talk about the whole handcuffs, bulletproof vest. There was an argument. So originally I said, okay, a lot of people said, hey, this is being done to make him look bad and make him look like a criminal. I made a counter argument that it's also because the bulletproof vest is to protect him. Because if somebody kills Luigi Mangione while in federal custody, it could be really bad for them and look really horrible for them because they're obligated to protect him. Karen kind of addressed both of those issues in this letter. She says, one, you're making him look bad and it's prejudicing the jury to make him look like he's the worst criminal that's ever faced, a jury. But also, there's nobody wants to kill Luigi Mangione except for the federal government. Yeah. So you're not protecting him against the public. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's also interesting that, what she could have said and didn't is, not only have there been no credible threats to his life other than by the feds, people love him, people support him, people who think that he is the one that did it and don't care support what they think happened. And so he's got a lot of love out there. So, there's also the counterpoint to that not only does he, he's not the one that needs a bulletproof vest. Maybe the rest of the healthcare CEOs out there are the ones that need it.
Right. And yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax is about whether or not a group of people were targeted. Who's really afraid? Is it the American public or is it all the CEOs that are afraid now and all that stuff? And man, United Healthcare has been all over the news with all kinds of shenanigans and lawsuits and shit that are coming out now. It's a shit show on the United Healthcare side. So she talks about how courts have long recognized the visibly shackling of defendants in front of a jury as prejudicial. Now, granted, he's not in front of a jury right now, and so she's basically going to argue that too, which is like, here's all the court cases that says you can't do that in front of a jury, but it also applies here because he's all over TV and everybody's seeing it, and these are all potential jurors.
That's
how much
exactly
weight does that have? Is that
No,
true?
100%. I concur, especially with a case that's received this much pretrial publicity. Every person who turns on the news, every person who signs on to TikTok or Instagram, these are all potential jurors or people who will come into contact with potential jurors. And while jurors are not supposed to do their own research, they're not supposed to talk about the case with friends and family once they've been sworn. This is a case that everybody in the country is talking about. And so the importance of shielding Luigi's image and preserving that presumption of innocence is even more urgent in this case because of that fact. Because every single person who comes into contact with any news story about this case is a potential juror or who has contact with a potential juror.
Yeah, and it's this case is crazy. It's funny. I do find a lot of people who say they don't know who Luigi is, and I'm like, how do you not know who? Because like he has worldwide attention. Like
Yes.
we're getting other countries that are following this,
Yes.
and also being, by the way, other countries that are being critical of American healthcare system. I have people who would say to me, "How is it you Americans are not rioting on your streets with how bad your healthcare system is?"
Yep.
I don't know. So I just wanted to point out this blue paragraph here. The Supreme Court stated 3 reasons for decision. That first, the criminal process presumes that a defendant is innocent until proven guilty. I can't tell you the number of people who don't seem to believe in this concept in America, that you're innocent until proven guilty. I had somebody literally tell me, for example, well, we know Koberger is guilty in the Idaho 4 because he's on trial. He wouldn't be, they don't arrest people who aren't guilty. And I'm like, oh my God, like you would never be on a jury with that attitude.
Do you see my eye twitching? My criminal defense attorney eye twitching?
I mean, do you get people like that, right? During the jury selection process, it'll tell you, well, he wouldn't be arrested if he wasn't guilty.
We actually have a question in voir dire, which is the pre-screening of jurors when you qualify them, that asks, do you believe that simply because someone has been indicted or there's a charging document that necessarily means that they're guilty? You would die if you saw the number of people who were bold enough to admit it, and then there's a whole bunch of others who won't admit it and who just sit down silently. It's disturbing.
And I don't want to be insulting, but is it that we're it? I don't even know. Is that, are we that stupid? Like I don't understand. Like how do people get to the belief that if you've been charged, you must be guilty? I don't know.
I think juries are actually really, really smart.
Yeah,
For the most part, I
that.
think people fancy themselves detectives, and that what they read and see on TV and on the internet is sufficient. And a lot of them will say, well, I've seen the evidence and I think this. So they almost put themselves in the position of a juror at trial, which isn't fair because none of us from the outside looking in are ever seeing the same trial that the 12 people or more, 18 people that are sitting on a jury are going to see. So that's not fair for us to make that leap. And also, don't forget, there are certain things. The whole role of the trial judge is to ensure that the evidence that's put in front of the eyes and ears of the jury complies with the rules of court. And so that means that there may be things out there in the public sphere or in the media that are not admissible evidence, that the jury is not permitted to see or hear, that people in the public are taking into consideration and drawing conclusions based on inadmissible evidence. And so I think people they think if I see something and I come to this conclusion, I'm justified in saying, well, they're guilty anyway. But that's dangerous. It's a dangerous mindset.
Yeah, and it bothers me too, because I feel like we should start, and I'm sure as a criminal defense attorney, you would agree, we should start with the premise that the person's innocent until proven guilty, not start with they're guilty and then have to prove their innocence.
Well, not should. We have to. That's the
law.
Have to. Right. We have to. That's not negotiable.
It just doesn't feel like that. The public has already made up their mind on a lot of this stuff before even day one in the trial.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to point out too, and I want to see if you'll second this, is I've watched enough trials to know that if you feel emotionally invested in this case or any case, hold on to your hats, because when you get to the trial, as soon as the prosecution lays out their case, you're going to think, oh my God, he's done for. And then you're going to hear the defense come on and you're like, oh my God, he's free. They're going to make really good arguments, and hearing it on the loan, it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. You're like, they got him, they don't got him, they got him, they don't got him. And and the jury's got to figure all that shit out.
Yeah, it's that whole, what's more important, primacy or recency? It's why we lawyers argue over who gets to go last, who gets the last word in front of the jury, or what they get to hear first. But yeah, it's.
Oh my God, you have a great point. So is it every state? So different states probably have a different rule. I want to get this clarified because generally speaking, you're right. The last thing somebody hears is the one that sticks in the mind most, right? And because of that, doesn't the defense usually close last, or is the prosecution close last, or does it matter on what state you're practicing?
Yeah, so it matters in what state you're practicing. Here, where I practice, if the defense puts up a case, in other words, if the defendant takes the stand and testifies, or you put forth any witnesses rather than just resting after the directed verdict stage, you have last argument, which means the prosecution must close in full, and then you get to close, and the prosecution may get rebuttal just based on your closing argument. But if you choose not to put up evidence, or excuse me, if you choose to put up evidence, then the prosecution gets the last word.
So I had a thought, and I'm trying to see if I can do this. Can you explain a little bit? We're getting ahead of ourselves because this is something I would want to talk to you about when we actually go to trial.
Yeah.
But what is the difference between what can be said during the guilt phase and presenting of facts versus those closing arguments? Isn't there a lot less restriction in closing arguments where you can say things that you like? It can be a little bit more argumentative in the close, perhaps, or what's the rule of that?
Sure. So opening statements and closing arguments are not evidence, and the judge will instruct the jury about that fact, that these are statements of the lawyers, and in particular in the case of a closing argument, it is intended to be a summation of the evidence. But of course, that summation is with your spin, right? Your theory of the case, what you believe the evidence shows versus what it doesn't show. And the jury is instructed that they must consider the evidence that's been presented. They can listen to closing arguments, but statements of lawyers are not evidence. But a closing argument is intended to persuade the jury to view the evidence, interpret the evidence, and see the evidence in the way that the defense is putting it forth, and then the prosecution will do the same thing.
It's the famous, I'm showing my age, but it's the same as it's the famous Johnny Cochran, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit statement on the close, right? Which is just like, he gets to say something really cool that'll stick in somebody's memory, and hopefully that's the last thing the jury is thinking is like, shit, well, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Like, he told me so.
Yep.
So let's talk about the Court of Appeals noted that it could not ignore the way that the image of a handcuffed or shackled defendant affects the public's perception of that person and the criminal proceedings generally. How much has Luigi Mangione's right to a fair trial been impinged already by the perp walk, all the guns surrounding him everywhere he goes, this bulletproof vest is, what I know, I guess it's a loaded question because we're still going to believe that he can get a fair and impartial jury, but how much is it hurting his chances to get a fair and impartial jury when they're making him look like such a criminal right off the bat?
A lot. And Karen recognizes the gravity of the situation, which is why I think she went as far as she did in this letter to point that out. Like I said, people probably didn't get a chance to watch my summary video, but my whole point was she could have asked for these two things in one paragraph. She could have said, please don't shackle him. Please lose the Kevlar. Thanks, respectfully, bye.
Right.
But she took the opportunity to say why she was asking for it, what the court and the law has to say about what she was asking for, and why it is so important, and why it's part of the larger picture. This isn't just about the hearing on the 26th. This is about Luigi's right to a fair trial generally, his right to be presumed innocent, and also on an even bigger level, this is just about the way the government interacts with criminal defendants in the system generally, and it's wrong what they're doing.
Right. And Karen made the point early on in this trial that some of the stuff she's had to find out about what the prosecution has by watching TV. Like literally she's getting stuff from documentaries before she's getting it in Discovery and things like this, which seems to be a big problem. I want to highlight this paragraph that she has. Every court appearance is widely covered by the news and social media, providing video footage, still images, court sketches, online content, multiple purported documentaries where actors attempt to recreate every alleged aspect of this case. In fact, in February 21st, 2025, court appearances, images of Mangione in handcuffs with a bulletproof vest featured in major news organizations such as Reuters, Washington Post, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, the New York Post, BBC, NBC, as well as social media platforms, X, Reddit, blah, 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 to name a few. Like, she's just like, everybody in the world has seen Luigi Mangione shackled like a criminal.
His ankles are famous. His ankles have more views on Twitter than I think the presidential account or like the Kardashians.
36 million people had seen his shackled ankles. Right. Yeah, she's got that right here in this paragraph. I got it. Mangione's shackled ankles were on X and garnered more than 36 million views. So yeah, she makes it, and like you said, she could have summarized this, but it has much more weight to say just how much this is prejudicial, it seems, against her client.
Yeah.
But
and it's
of
not
course,
abstract. She's pointing to actual examples. Like there is a picture of his feet in shackles in this image of a prisoner and a guilty person that 36 million people looked at on the internet. So it's
yeah,
not just her squawking about something. She is pointing to tangible examples of how these harmful and prejudicial images are being pumped out there and how much damage they can do and how much reach they have. That's the point.
now there are people who say, and I feel like I know the answer, but I want to have you say it. There are people who say, well, then we should throw this case out. He can't get a fair trial. But this trial is going to happen, whether or not you think you have a fair trial or not, right? But I mean, and in fairness, they can seat, right, an impartial jury or get close to it, right? Even though there's a lot of people that are prejudiced, they can do a fairly good job of getting an impartial jury, don't you think? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and the judge will be very meticulous in jury qualification and selection to try to ensure that they're weeding people out who have preconceived notions or ideas about this case, or weeding people out who, by their own admission, cannot be fair and impartial. Now, does that mean it's perfect? No, but that's no different in Luigi's case than it is in any other case. Jurors either want to be on a jury and they might tell little white lies to get on the jury. They may, want to run like hell and get out of there when they could have been a good juror. And so I think that the judge will be very careful in the jury selection process. And yes, nothing is perfect, but just because all of these things have happened doesn't mean that the case goes away. It means that Karen has arguments to make and she has a record to keep. And part of what she's doing and kind of weaving this narrative along and along is that she's setting herself up for the arguments that she will make in the future. And those arguments will be important because when the judge denies her motion to dismiss the case for these reasons, that record is preserved so that when an appellate court is looking at this case down the road, that objection or that argument is preserved for their review, for them to consider whether it was appropriate or not. That's really what's important, is that preservation of the record.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that mention, because a lot of people are so worried about them putting Luigi Mangione to death. This is going to take forever, and there's going to be appeals. There's going to be appeals for decades, if that, and so, and you're, like you said, if you don't say anything, then it's like, well, why didn't you say something about it at the time? But if you do what she's doing, this is all grounds for appeals every single step of the way. Hey, I told you from day one this was impairing his right to a fair trial. I told you from day one this was the case. And all of these were things that they can bring up. But if they just remain silent and don't say anything, then there's no real grounds for appeal, right? I mean,
well, it's not preserved. The appellate court. So what she will do on the actual record. This is part of the court's record. But you get into a trial when it comes to having pretrial motions, she will renew the motions already made. She may make new ones that will become part of the record in the case. The appellate court can only review matters that have been preserved for their review. So if a contemporaneous objection is not raised, if an issue is not raised, you can't raise it later on once it's too late. The appellate court can only go back and look at things that have been properly preserved. So that's why she's being very careful in the way she's doing it.
So there's a question on this blue thing that I want to get your personal answer to. In addition to pretrial prejudice concerns, shackling Mr. Mangione's hands will limit his ability to meaningfully participate in his defense by preventing him from accessing his legal papers, taking notes, and providing notes to counsel during appearance. Now, the personal part is this. I've seen lots of trials. Something gets said on the stand, a witness or whatever, and the client leans into his attorney, pushes a piece of paper over or whispers into his or her ear, and there's a private conversation going on. What is those usually like? Is it the person saying, I never said that? Like, is he arguing, or is the client usually arguing what's being said on the stand? Does it look bad for him to be whispering in your ear after somebody just said something? And what's going on between the client and the attorney at that table when they have that little whispering session and notes being passed in?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the client. I mean, sometimes it's a very serious conversation where, they're bringing something up that they think the witness has said inconsistent with what they know to be true, or a question they think ought to be asked. I think that's very defendant specific. To kind of give a current example, if anybody's been watching the Karen Reed trial, she is the most involved criminal defendant I've ever seen. I think it's actually bananas. I can't believe her lawyers are letting her behave the way she's behaving, but that's a separate issue. So she is very involved. So you best believe when she's passing notes or she's whispering, it's probably very substantive. That being said, I tried a double murder case recently where my client leaned over to me at least 5 times a day asking me, is it time for a break yet? I need a snack. So
Like you're on trial for murder and you're worried
You're on
about
trial for
smack.
murder, buddy. We can get you a cold apple later. And so it depends. It depends on the person. But I mean, her point, there's a reason why she only spent like 2 sentences on that. It's really the least, I mean, it's a legitimate concern. I'm not trying to say that it's not. But it's the least significant of them. I mean, I would imagine, I've never tried to write in handcuffs, but I would imagine it's rather cumbersome. So he'd probably much rather be able to write his notes with a free hand. And he should be able to participate in his own defense. That's important. And so her point is well taken. I just think that's the reason why she spent the least amount of time on that particular prong.
So this brings up a question that I wanted to get your insight on. There's a famous saying, I think it's famous in law circles, which is the client who defends himself has a fool for a client, or something to that effect, right? So how much, right? So how much, by the way, is it different between clients who want to be super active in their own defense and be part of it and making decisions, or how much is it, does the attorney say, you're not the lawyer here, I am, you just shut your mouth and let me do my job? Like, how's that work?
I think it depends on a number of things. Like the attorney-client dynamic is so unique because it can vary from client to client, from case to case. I have certain clients that say to me, Allie, I trust you. I hired you for a reason. I appreciate you trying to loop me in on things, but I don't really need to know about that. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'll trust what you tell me, and we're good. And then I have other clients who ask a lot of questions. And I personally, the way I handle cases, I think clients have a right to know anything and everything that they want to know about their case, why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting, why I'm counseling them to do or not do the things that I counsel them about, and for them to have an explanation. You know, it's not a parent-child relationship where you say, it's because I said so. That's not my style. That might be somebody else's style, and clients may like that sometimes, but I think a client has the right to participate in his own defense, and should, to a reasonable degree. Okay. I think what Karen A is doing is ridiculous. And I think the fact that her lawyers are letting her do it is ridiculous, on a number of levels. If you think you're a lawyer, then represent yourself. But if you're going to pay somebody for their expertise and their education and their experience, let them do their job without kind of meddling in the middle of it. So I think there's a balance to be struck. But for the most part, I think that it's good to have a close working relationship with the client when it comes to a case, because you're talking about somebody's life and their freedom.
Right. And it's hard because on a personal level, I consider myself to be a pretty bright person, and it would be hard for me to just sit back and say, I'm not going to be involved in my own defense. Like, yeah. But by the same token, being a smart guy, you're the lawyer, not me. And so like, it would be hard for me to just sit there and not be part of my own defense, but also have to acknowledge that I'm not the expert here. You are.
Sure.
So yeah, I just don't know how I would do it if I was on trial. They hope never on trial for anything.
Yeah.
But if so, I'm coming to South Carolina and having you be my of course it has to be committed, I guess. I'll commit a crime in South Carolina. How about that? And then you can represent me.
I represent people all over the place.
Oh, that's right. You got federal cases.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make it a federal thing. Anyway, so I shouldn't make jokes like that, because I'm probably going to get a phone call or something like that.
No.
So let's talk about the flight risk. So she talks about how Luigi Mangione is not a flight risk. Now, there was allegations at some point that Luigi Mangione had something like $8,000 US in his backpack and $2,000 in foreign currency. Are they going to use that to say that he's a flight risk? But it also relates to the whole bail thing. Why do we have not bail? Are they saying that he's a flight risk, that as soon as he steps out of jail for even a second with the ankle bracelet, he's out of the country? Or what's the thought process?
I don't know. I think it's a bunch of malarkey. I don't think there's any reason why they need to put on the show that they're putting on, other than that they have a narrative to push, which is Luigi's a bad, dangerous guy. You should not only convict him, you should vote to kill him. And Karen's calling them out on that, because he's not a flight risk. And like she said, if he's walking around like a free-range chicken at Brooklyn Metro all day, every day, around members of the public, attorneys, and other people, what changes the minute that he's inside of a courtroom, also, by the way, full of cops and attorneys and court officials? Is he all of a sudden going to become this security threat? Now, that's not to say that during transport, for officer safety and for somebody running from a transport van, that they shouldn't treat him like everybody else. But there's no reason why he should be treated as a heightened security risk when he has shown no qualities and he has taken no actions to indicate that should be a heightened concern beyond anybody else.
Yeah, and I'm getting ahead of myself on the letter because it's not on the screen, and I want to talk about this blue thing on the screen. But I want to ask the question because there's a part of this letter later on where she talks about the common area, right? Well, let me scroll up because there were some interesting things that we didn't hear about Luigi Mangione at all that I thought were super interesting, such as like he has work detail, which I don't think anybody's ever said, right?
Yeah,
So
and
it
he's in
talks,
general population. He's
and he's
not in
in general
special
pop,
housing. Yeah.
right?
And she's
So
seeing him every day. I saw that and I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
So thank you. I was like, it's funny because people keep saying things like, oh, did you hear he's in the shoe? Did you hear that he's held in a special wing and he can't see anybody and he's all alone or whatever? And she's like saying, no, he's in general pop. He's never been in the shoe. He's got work details. So and we meet with him in a common area with everybody else. Now I've visited a prisoner one time in jail in the common area. So I know what it looks like, at least in the jail where I was at. And you're right. There's criminals with their families and friends sitting around in a big, huge room where we're all intermingling. I can go buy, the criminal a soda, whatever, and so he doesn't have to dip into his commissary or whatever.
They're not criminals. They're just accused people.
Right. And so part of the thing I wanted to ask you again from counsel's perspective, how often do you is all of your interaction with your client in this kind of open area where other people can be listening into your attorney-client conversation, or do you have private rooms? I mean, how much of your conversation, or more specifically, if you want to answer to Karen, how much of Luigi and Karen's, or you and any of your clients, you can ask either way you want, is very, very private and nobody gets to hear it, or it's in an open common room and you meet daily in a big open room?
Yeah, so it depends on the facility. I have some places where they'll actually let me walk right back into the dorm and I sit at like the table where they all play cards and watch TV, and I'm just in there with all of the guys or girls. And there are places that have booths, private booths for attorneys to meet with their clients in that are soundproof and not monitored. And then you have what it sounds like she's referring to, which is like a community room or a multi-purpose room where you would be able to kind of space yourself out enough to where you wouldn't be able to hear the conversation of the person next to you at the table. I would say that I would guess that when it's just a friendly, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you visit? She's probably okay with sitting at that table. But if they were having to go through evidence, discovery videos, or have strategy conversations that would be particularly sensitive or private, she's probably going into some type of a secure attorney room to have those visits. That's probably not something that she's doing with people who are having their family visits and eating their Cheetos, 2 tables down.
So she talked about meeting with him almost daily or whatever. How often do you typically see a client?
Well, okay, so prepping for trial, yeah, you're going to want to meet with the client daily. And also, when you have the type of practice that Mark and Karen have, when you can kind of, we almost call it like a boutique practice where you can focus on just 1 or 2 or a handful of clients at a time, you will have the ability to kind of see somebody every day and prep like that every day. I have a rule. I do not allow detained clients actually I don't allow any clients not to hear from me in over 3 weeks. That's my rule. That's not allowed. Detained clients I typically see every 2 to 3 weeks. As a general rule, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just that I like for people to kind of see me regularly. Now, if they have got an important hearing coming up or a trial, I probably am going to be there all day, every day, or multiple days in a row leading up to that. So I would imagine that, Karen might be close and convenient to the facility, and she's probably focusing maybe even exclusively on this case right now, meaning to the exclusion of all other clients. And so it's probably become part of her daily routine. I love that. Love it.
So I will try to let you go soon because I know you got to be up early in the morning, but I have so many questions for you. Like, for example, when Karen comes in, does she come in, you think, to visit him with a team of lawyers or another person, or is it just her and him? Like, what does that look like, you think, in a case of this profile?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a mixture of both. Again, if she's working on this case to the exclusion of all others, she's probably there every day. And some of those days, maybe, some of the other team members come with her. Maybe she's got an investigator. We have an in-house investigator at my firm that I bring with me to kind of work through things. Maybe a paralegal or a paraprofessional would come with her. There's no telling. I would say it's probably a mix of people, but I'd just be guessing. But that's how I do it. Yeah,
Is there a
it
limit
depends
that
what we're
the
doing.
jail sets on how many people can come visit him at a time? And
Yeah, some facilities actually don't allow non-lawyers in at all.
Mhm.
And then there are other facilities near me that they don't care. You could walk in there with whatever you want, and if they know you, they're going to wave you in. But yeah, I don't know.
So I'll try to skim through some of these things so we don't spend forever on it, and I can let you go. I did want to point out this thing that Karen says, "Hey, Mr. Mangione is okay with cameras being in the courtroom." Everybody and their dog, of course, wants to see Luigi Mangione again. It seems like, or at least a fair number of people. And so she says here in this thing that, "Hey, Mr. Mangione consents to future court appearances being both photographed and broadcast via video." And apparently, they won't do that in the federal court, but they may, or they have the ability to do it in the state court. What is the
Yep.
likelihood, though? Do you think that they're going to allow cameras inside the courtroom for this trial?
I actually wrote a note to myself there. I wrote to myself that I think we can expect video footage of the state cases moving forward.
But Karen is asking essentially for the state case to be either put on hold indefinitely, dismissed, or whatever, and just focus on the federal case. So, yay, that we might have a chance to see it televised, but it's going to be after the federal case, and that's going to be a year and a half down the road, right?
But there may be status conferences and other motion hearings that we may end up being privy to as a result.
So let's continue to see if I can finish all the last thoughts that I have so that we can both get out of here and let our people go and do their lives. Let's see. Here's where she talks about that 15-car police caravan, airplane, helicopter captured on video. I thought that was funny. We kind of covered that already. Now, so this was the paragraph we talked about some of his things that we didn't know. I'm just going to highlight it, even though we kind of said it. During the 167 days in pretrial detention, Mr. Mangione has not been a security or flight risk requiring special restricted different treatment than any other general MDC inmate. He has never been cited by officers for misconduct, nor has he ever been punished or restricted. He has not exhibited any uncooperative behavior and has not been placed in a specially restricted housing unit, SHU. In fact, he has been signed to work detail and is in general population. To further illustrate the point, counsel visits Mr. Mangione nearly daily in the common visitor area at MDC, a large open room with rows of small plastic chairs, no barriers between people or groups, where unshackled inmates meet with their families and where visitors and lawyers walk freely, buy food from vending machines. We talked about all this, but again, it was new information to get verification. He's never been in the SHU, he's in general pop, and he's got work detail. I just thought that was kind of cool that it just kind of slipped in there that, hey, I don't think we've ever had those answers before.
Yeah.
Let's see. So they talk here about there's no reason to protect him, again, with the bulletproof vest. And then she talks about, and we did talk about this, so we won't spend a lot of time, about the one time that you can maybe misinterpret Mangione's appearance as being aggressive, which was when he was being shoved into the courthouse and shouts about how, but here's the quote right there: "Your coverage of this event is completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience."
Yeah.
Now that feels like me an indictment to the whole healthcare issue, but maybe it's something else. But let's see. Let's move on. No, there's been no known threats to. Oh yeah, so somebody had indicated. Oh my gosh, there's a conspiracy theory going around. There's a new. I'll try to make this brief. I'm not good at brevity, but there's a new video going around about the shooter where all of our eyes were on the shooting because it's first and foremost, and everybody's wanting to watch every detail. Where there's a shadowy figure in the background that looks like as another person that might have been involved who was seen kind of rushing away at the same time this happened. And now people are picking up on it. How did we miss this? Who's this guy back there? And somebody had said, is the protective order because there's somebody else involved in this and they might want to shut Luigi up or vice versa because there's others. And now the rumor mill's all abuzz. Like, who's being protected by the protection order that came out earlier and blah, 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 blah. You have any thoughts on that, even though I know it's complete rumor mill? And
I don't. Yeah. I'd have to go back and watch the video again. Now I kind of want to see if I can see a shadowy figure.
Yeah. There's a video that's out there that apparently I've seen it once. When you slow it down to like 0.25 speed, you can see a shadowy figure that seems in a very suspicious place. And you're like, what the hell is that? And I had a theory going early on in this. I said, what if he didn't act alone? What if this was a group of individuals? Yeah. And if it was a how to blow up a pipeline situation where a group of individuals agreed that one of them would take the fall so that the rest of them could go free and maybe do it again or something like that. And I just kind of threw that out there. Now there's people saying, oh my God, devil's advocates might have been right. What if there's another guy involved? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. The other part of me is like, it is the middle of Manhattan, and I don't care what
Right.
time of day it is. There's people everywhere, so I'm sure somebody would be in some kind of suspicious position. But
Agreed. It could be a million different things.
yeah,
It doesn't mean anything, but it's just out there in the wind. So there it is.
yeah,
Let's see. They talk about how she made a point about when the federal marshals, the marshals themselves, basically released him from handcuffs, but the state wanted him handcuffed. By the way, there was a moment. Do you remember this? There was a moment where in court, I think it was in the state case, he was brought in shackles, and Karen asked them to remove the shackles, and the judge said he agreed to that. Go ahead and remove the shackles. And then someone in the prosecution or law enforcement argued no, and they left him in shackles. Do you remember that event? What happened with that?
That's a great question. I actually brought that up in my video as well. So I wonder what they said to the judge, because even when they came back and the judge let Karen put her objections on the record, the government never actually articulated what the specific security threat was, which the case law would seem to indicate that they needed to make that specific finding on the record. So it was odd that they said, well, they would feel more comfortable if he was shackled. It's security risk. Well, tell me what it is. Articulate what that specific risk is. And they didn't do that. So that piqued my interest as well.
Yeah, and people have been speculating, is it the protection orders are protecting a witness who's afraid they're going to get killed because the population will take them out on behalf of Luigi? Are they afraid Luigi is some kind of mafioso and can call hit orders from inside the prison? Yeah. Or is it? I mean, we could speculate all day long. We don't know, right? We don't know what the protection order is for. Let's see. To conclude, so to conclude, basically, I think the summary point, we're finally finished with this letter, I think, is basically this. She wants to say, let's put in writing an order so we don't have to keep arguing about this every single time we come to court on whether or not he's going to be shackled or not. So put an order out that says from now on, I think she worded it in a certain way at the end of this, but from now on, let's have it in writing that we're not going to shackle him coming into court. What is the likelihood that Judge Carl is going to agree to that kind of thing?
I think it's pretty likely. I would be surprised if they didn't agree to it. I think it's a reasonable request. And absent the government being able to show some specific threat or some articulable reason why he should be treated differently, I think it's a pretty reasonable request. I think she's made a good case for it. She supported her position, and I wouldn't be surprised if the judge said, okay, that's reasonable.
All right. Well, I mean, once again, Allie, it is such a pleasure having you on and being able to answer questions from that, the real life. Like, this is what an attorney does talk to her client about. And this is what it looks like when I'm visiting people. I love that so much. And yeah, I would like to be able to say that you're a friend, not just somebody who comes on this show every once in a while. So I hope, again, we will get to do this again. I want to make sure if you have any closing thoughts. By the way, on TikTok, make sure you're following Allie Benevento on TikTok. It's a little harder for me because she is actually in TikTok. So if you click on her name in TikTok, you can go ahead and make sure you're following there.
I'm in there. I think people have had some questions too. I don't know if you wanted to go through questions.
Absolutely. Well, I'm on your time. So you if you want to answer some questions, let's go for it.
Sure. Yeah. Do we have any pulled out? Is anybody pulling out questions or?
So on TikTok, if I have my moderator, somebody pin it in TikTok and I'll look for it in there. I'm looking on YouTube to see, and a lot of it's stuff that it hasn't been a super question. It's more comments about how they love the show, they love what we're talking about, but it's not a real question. So let me see. How do they assign his job? Somebody's asking. So we talked about his work detail. How does he get assigned a job? How's that work?
Whatever they need to have done, and the fact that he doesn't have any disciplinaries, what they usually do when you get to a facility is they'll do like a risk assessment. If you don't have any medical conditions or psychiatric conditions, you've got some education or experience that they can put to use, and you've proved that you're not a disciplinary risk or a flight risk or a troublemaker, they will give you jobs with certain levels of trust. You might be the person that's delivering food or doing laundry, or maybe you're even going outside the facility and kind of working on landscaping. It really just depends on how they assess your risk and what needs they have within the facility. And sometimes they even ask you what you like. What do you want to do? Not always, but sometimes.
Somebody asked a question, and for some reason it's cut off on my screen, but I think we'll get the gist of it. Is it common for people to try to sneak things into inmates?
Oh, yeah. Contraband is a huge... Listen, so you want to know how wild it is? Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know if this is going on. I know it's going on like in upstate New York and Western New York. Where I'm originally from. My dad is actually retired from the New York State Department of Corrections. So I hear all the stories. But we have an issue here in South Carolina with what's called soaking. They are no longer giving people, and I think this is part of the reason why Luigi is getting photocopied copies of his mail is because people are actually taking paper or books and they're soaking it in drugs, like they're soaking
Like
it in
acid
all
and
sorts of things
LSD.
so
Yeah.
that they can peel it off and smoke it or eat it.
Right.
And it's been happening for a long time. So yeah, you can't have things delivered from Amazon anymore. You can't send books, and all of your mail ends up actually getting scanned in, and they read it on a tablet because people were actually rolling up their mail and smoking it. We've got people taking drones and dropping things over the fence at the Department of Corrections. You've got people running full-scale drug trafficking operations from within the facilities. I mean, people are resourceful, let me tell you, and it gets creative. So yes,
Yeah,
that's a huge problem.
And they even want very specific types of ink because they can use ink to get drugs in. And I have to share a real quick personal thing as well. I actually know somebody. I won't name how I know them, who they are, who made it onto our state's dumbest criminals list because they were incarcerated and on the phone asked somebody to bring them drugs, and they showed up in a van with their drugs and were stopped by, hey, can I see your vehicle? Because they literally were on the phone. Can you bring me some weed? Sure, yeah, I'll hook you up. And I'm like, wow, how dumb.
You got to be a little smarter with your plug when you're behind bars. It's true.
What else do we got? Let's see. Is there any other questions from either side? Let's see. I'm going to pin this so we can both read it together. Is Ali coming back to discuss today's prosecutor's motions? It's scary seeing the notebook image of his handwritten notes. People say it's not his.
Yeah, I'm going to read it.
Yeah, whether or not Ali comes on to my show to talk about it or not, clearly she's going to read it, and clearly I'm going to read it. We're both going to give our take. You're, of course, I'd go on with you almost every day, but you have a full life. So, but by all means, we're going to both read it and look for Ali's take, look for my take on YouTube. And if we can get together and talk about it in detail, or we decide together that that's a smart thing to do, then we'll do that. Other questions? He is allowed to apply for federal bail. Do you think that he will? If so, what? Nope. No. Explain further. Okay. So you just don't think he will.
Nope,
okay.
I don't think he will, because bail it's a one-shot deal in federal court. So he waived detention initially at the arraignment. That's what you do. You reserve the right to petition the court for bail at a later time. Because this is what we would call a presumption case, because he is facing the death penalty because of the nature of the offense, there is a presumption that no amount of bail or no conditions can reasonably assure his appearance in court. And so the chances, that's just fancy speak for the chances of him getting bail being like less than zero. So I don't see them even bothering to petition. I think they're going to focus their efforts on trial prep.
So guess what? I have to tell you, by the way, this is the reason why, Ali, that I keep wanting to move to YouTube. I just got restricted on TikTok just now because we were talking about drugs. We were talking about smuggling drugs into the prison system. I got restricted. They said for talking about contraband and talking about, and literally we're talking about news. We're doing it, right? So the fact that we even talked about that from a legal, I'm now restricted and got a spanking on TikTok. This is why I'm focusing on long form content on YouTube. Let's see other questions. How is he going to have a fair trial with all the alleged evidence that they keep publishing? Second day painting him so bad, or today painting him so bad. So yeah, there's basically what I think they're getting at is the whole 4 documentaries saying that he's a killer. I mean, literally with titles like Luigi Mangione, The Mind of a Killer, things like this. But yeah, but at the end of the day, like I said, at the end of the day, they're going to have this trial. So we're not going to say, oops, he can't get a fair trial, dismiss the thing. It's going to happen. Yeah. So
and let's not act like this is new. Okay, people have been jumping on the bandwagon of somebody's arrested, they must therefore be guilty because they're accused of this terrible thing, and I don't care what the evidence shows, or I don't care. People have been taking that position for years. It's just that Luigi happens to be accused of a crime that has some philosophical underpinnings that people might be able to get behind. He happens to be strikingly handsome and young and educated and rich. So there are a number of things that make it different. Yes, we're paying attention to it more, but people have been assuming somebody's guilty and calling for them to be hung in the middle of town square for forever. And it's just as wrong in other contexts as it is for Luigi.
Yeah, I have a comment I'm going to read from TikTok real quick, although I pinned one on YouTube that you should be able to see this in the queue here. But the comment from TikTok was, Luigi Mangione sought professional help for brain fog, but his doctors didn't take him seriously. What can be done? Now, my personal thought on this is, if where you're going with this, I don't think Luigi Mangione has a mental condition. I think that would have already been brought up by Karen Agnifilo. They would have had to have said that he's got some kind of impairment. And in fact, in my take, the fact that they've asked for a laptop for him to help in his defense and all these things suggest that he's of right mind and everything's fine, or they wouldn't be saying he's capable of helping them in the defense. But what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have not heard that they have raised any concerns about competency or any medical issues. That's not to say that Luigi hasn't been having private conversations with his lawyers about certain struggles. I was unclear. I saw that question come through. I was unclear whether they were referring to like since this has happened or maybe prior to the event. But you know,
Yeah.
here's the thing: Karen is experienced and really good at what she does. If there's any angle that needs to be explored, any stone that needs to be overturned, I promise you, she's done it. She's going to do her due diligence. So if there's anything there that needs to be called out or explored, I think she's going to do it.
So we did have the question previously, basically was what happened to the Pennsylvania thing? Did the evidence get thrown out? No, we haven't. There's no ruling yet.
Nope.
We're waiting still for a judge to rule on that. Would he be able to use his own health records for his defense, brain fog, spondy, etc.? Do you have a thought on how to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know what type of medical records there would be like contemporaneous with the event, or let's say that there's some record that he was being treated for some type of mental illness or issues with recollection or memory or control or things like that. But certainly if that is going to play into the defense's theory of the case, I'm sure that's something that they may bring up. Or if there would be some medical reason for behavior. But again, all of that we're speculating because we don't know. Is Karen's defense going to be, it wasn't him, you have the wrong guy? Or let me tell you why this happened. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
There's a comment from TikTok that goes, it's a two-parter in my opinion, even though the question was simply, has Karen ever lost a case? And there's two reasons why I say it's a two-parter. When this first happened, we were told, a lot of people were told, Karen's never lost a case. Oh my God, he's got a great lawyer. She's never lost a case. And then when we dug further, it's like, well, they don't publish the win-loss records of the attorney, so we can't prove that she's never lost a case.
Right.
But following that is also
But
the
also,
question.
she was a prosecutor.
And that's part two of the question. This is her first, is it her first defense or a time as a defense attorney? Because she's been a prosecutor prior to this. And does that mean Luigi Mangione is in trouble because he has quote unquote a rookie defense attorney? Like, what is your thought? Is it her first, it's not her first rodeo, but is it her first defense case? And does that hurt in any way, shape or form, Luigi?
I don't know if it's her first defense case or her 100th defense case. What I can tell you is this: Karen Agnifilo is a brilliant, talented, experienced lawyer. And when you are the criminal defendant facing the power of the federal government trying to take your actual life from you, you want somebody who has been in the shoes of those prosecutors who are trying to send you to prison or take away your life. She knows how to think like a prosecutor so that she can anticipate what they're going to do and she can respond appropriately. So I actually think that plays as a strength that she has been a career prosecutor. You see federal prosecutors all the time going into private practice and becoming defense attorneys. And you know, it's not so very different. Yes, you're arguing from a different perspective in the case, but you know, trial work is an art, and I think that she is a damn good lawyer, and I agree he's in good hands. I don't care what number of case it is. She's got years and years and years of experience. Her reputation precedes her. She's awesome.
And even I'm hoping I get this right. I think the federal judges, Margaret Garnett, I'm going off memory, but if I remember right, that she had a moment before the attorneys that basically said, look, I've got a working relationship with Karen Agnifilo. I've worked with her when she was a prosecutor. We all have a personal relationship. Is this a problem? But to your point, she knows all of their tricks. She was in a top position. She knows how the prosecution works. I would consider that a very good advantage for Luigi Mangione, that she knows exactly how the prosecution works because she's done it.
And in the practice of law, that's just how things work. You know, it's a little, so New York is a much larger bar, but like for an example here in South Carolina, I mean, there are judges that I regularly appear in front of that I've also had a glass of wine with, or I've had dinner with, or I've been at a social event with, that I text with regularly. That doesn't mean that somebody cannot be professional and set aside that personal relationship. Now, if they're related to you, or like it's your best friend and you've, you know, that's a little bit different. You want to disclose that for conflict purposes, but you know, the practice of law, and especially the trial work, can kind of be a lonely existence, you almost gravitate towards other people who do it, and you gravitate towards the people in your circle. So I think that even in a large practice area or bar like New York State, and specifically New York City, it's going to be hard to find people who don't know each other and interact with each other socially, or as colleagues regularly. I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I wanted to point out before I lose the question, because I unpinned this thing. Somebody wanted to know where to follow you, and here's the thing: I don't think you have a YouTube channel yet, right?
But I'm working on it.
Yes, so she is working on it. So unfortunately, you YouTubers who asked on the YouTube side, how can you follow Allie? She's not quite there yet, but I'm going to twist her arm and get her on YouTube. But on TikTok, you can get her followed if you're on TikTok. But if you don't, I know a lot of people don't want to go to TikTok. And hell, I'm a little bit pissed off that I got flagged tonight. But so let's get you on YouTube sometime. So what about those client calls someone said that got listened to? Do you have any? I mean, we know we've talked about this, you and I, even on one of my lives before, but you want to address it again?
Shame. And shame on them for lying about it 4 times. I hope Karen burns them on that.
Yeah, it's a crazy case, and I got some people that were starting to make some comments about the Idaho 4, but we're not there quite yet. By the way, are you interested in the Idaho 4 case?
Yeah,
still?
I am. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
I read and listened to what you sent me. I need to get into the nitty gritty caught up, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy case, and I'm looking forward to being able to ask you some really good stuff on that. So I'm encouraged that you're still interested. I thought maybe, like after you looked at it, you're like, oh, forget that, I'm not touching that with the 10-foot pole. But if you're interested, I'm going to keep pinging you about it and see if we can talk about that case a little bit more. Any other questions? Let's see. How come there's been no update on the recusal of the DA? And then for some reason it's cut off. But I think what we're talking about here is the person that basically got recused or recused themselves because of we don't know why, but it was right around the time of the listening to the phone calls
issue. Know why. We know why.
Right.
They done messed up and they knew it. And they knew they had to get rid of somebody at least for optics. I don't think we're going to get an update on that. I think it was kind of like, okay, we removed this person. He's no longer on the case. Here's the acting U.S. attorney, and it's moved forward from there. So I don't know that there's anything to update about on that.
Right. And so it's one of those speculation. I'm glad that you said it, because I said as well, I kind of hit it hard and said, I know damn well why he was recused or whatever. And people were like, you don't know that, he just got promoted or whatever. And I'm like, okay, fair. I don't know why, but my gut tells me it was all related to damage control. Like, hey, we took care of the problem. Yeah. And that's what you think too. Let's see. Will June 26th be a quick hearing? What can we expect that to play out? Yeah, I guess that's a good question. What do you expect is going to happen on June 26th?
I think that the judge will rule on any outstanding motions. I think that they will begin to discuss trial calendars, and take up any other issues that may need to be resolved in that state case. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how there are going to be some issues that are probably properly raised in the federal context that may kind of spill over into the state case, but I think that they will address all of the outstanding motions, and the judge will rule on those motions, if not before, at that hearing. That would be my guess.
Yeah, and I was wondering, how long? I still have questions. I don't know that we have answered this. How long is it going to be before we hear an answer in Pennsylvania? Like, what are we waiting for on that decision?
And I don't believe that the DA in Pennsylvania has responded to Dickey's motion, or I haven't seen one. Maybe I missed it.
I think the prosecution did respond and said the arrest was legal, and they gave all the reasons why it was legal. So I've been waiting now for the judge to rule on who was right. But it brings this question. So now we know, you and I looked at it. They've got photographs of pages of Luigi Mangione's manifesto and confession letter, which wouldn't even be admissible if that arrest was illegal in Altoona. But now it's showing up in paperwork here. Now, if they had already ruled in Pennsylvania that was an illegal arrest, would we be seeing it in the paperwork here? Like, I don't understand how they could put it into the paperwork if it was not admissible in court in the first place.
I'm more curious about how or why that wasn't filed under seal, given the protective order that is in place in the federal case. Why they didn't file under seal in the state case? I don't know. That may be a jurisdiction or a practice specific thing with New York, but I know here you wouldn't put something like that in a public filing because you're not sure, what its status will be in terms of admissibility at a trial. And so that may be something that you file under seal. But again, I don't practice in New York, so that might be standard protocol. It's just bizarre to me, honestly. And again, this is without me having read the 80 whatever page response it is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to taking a break when we're done to decompress, because I always have to do that after doing a live, but then getting into the deep dive of that document. For starting to get ready to wrap up, two things. If you're on TikTok right now, because I saw you earlier in TikTok, Allie, you might want to post a message again so people have a quick way to hyperlink your name and jump to your account and follow you one more time. So just post something, say hi or something on TikTok if you're still there.
Okay.
Because it makes it a little easier for people to be able to click on your name and so make sure on TikTok that you guys are following Allie Benevento. Again, on YouTube, she's not there yet, so there's nothing for you to follow. I will try to continue to foster our friendship and bring Allie on for conversations like this and get her into Idaho 4 eventually for you guys. That'll be exciting as well. I want to go ahead and wrap up here. There was something I was going to say in closing, and now I've lost my closing. But I want to, here's what I was going to say in wrap up. Again, I will be reading the 80-something page document. I will be doing a deep dive video that I'm going to publish hopefully tomorrow morning. And then I go live again at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for questions and answers on it. So expect my analysis of the thing to be a long form video on YouTube if you want to watch my long form analysis and my initial thoughts. And then I'll do about an hour live where I just take questions and answers, where I'm expecting hopefully that you've had a chance to watch that video and come with some great educated questions. If not, I'll fill you in on the details. Until such time, Allie, you have anything else you want to say on the way out?
No, I don't. Thanks so much for having me on again. This is fun. I love everybody's questions. I love talking about the law. This is great. So I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And apparently, I think my volume might have been low on TikTok. I have got a lot of technicals still to work out. But you know what? For me, it looks like we're beautiful on YouTube. It looks amazing. So that's it. Let's say goodnight, and everybody have a great one. Good luck in your trial that you got going on.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thanks
see
so
you
much.
again soon.
Appreciate you. Bye, everybody.